Welcome to the funnel. My name is John Shea, and I'm the president of Alignment Group. This is episode number 185 of the funnel, implementing a sales onboarding program. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to put your pen and paper down. Head on over to alignment-group.com/the funnel and subscribe, and we will send you the show notes. So here we go. Today you will learn about job descriptions. Different kind of job description, but a job description. Repeatable processes, the tool sets, leadership, and measurement. So let's start with job descriptions. So what I mean by job descriptions is when you build an onboarding program, a sales onboarding program, it is all encompassing, right? So you're trying to teach them about product, you're trying to teach them about the company, you're trying to teach sales process. And there are different people that perform different roles within the onboarding program. Each one of those roles or responsibilities should have a description, a clear understanding of what they're supposed to do when it comes to sales onboarding. Their role, clearly defined, clear understanding, the responsibilities that they have in helping to build that sales rep into a high producer. Maybe part of that is the contribution to the overall long-term development of that sales rep. So the idea is that everyone knows their role. Everyone has their responsibility, and in some cases, who they're reporting to within that onboarding program. To some degree, it's like a project, right? Where there's a project leader, and you bring people together from different departments, and you try to, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So the project starts, it goes through its iterations, and then it closes. It's similar to that with one exception, that this is ongoing. And that's why it's important to define everybody's role and responsibility. It's important to define their job description as it pertains to the onboarding process, the sales onboarding process. I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you, because last time we talked about building an onboarding program, a sales onboarding program. Now we're talking about the implementation and what it's going to take to implement. So once you build it, you put the project together to build it, right? And you bring everybody together from the different departments, and you do some brainstorming, and you define what they need, and everybody sort of contributes to that. You move into the stage where you're delivering it. And that's where the job description is real important. So everyone knows the role that they play, that it's not a one and done, that you don't just help build it, and then when a sales rep shows up, you do a little bit of work. This is an ongoing process that needs to be revisited. The conversation needs to continue. It needs to get better. It needs to be tweaked, et cetera, et cetera. When you have specific roles for people in this environment, it makes it a lot easier to manage. Next, we have repeatable processes. Everybody knows that's listened to the podcast for the last few years. Even back when we were doing sort of the sales and marketing thing with Lindsay, and she just had some great insight into the marketing things. A lot of discussions and a lot of the conversations we would have would be about those processes and repeatable processes on the marketing side and on the sales side, right? I'm real big on sales process. It's very foundational for a sales department. And it goes the same here. The repeatable processes I'm talking about are those onboarding processes. Well-documented program. In other words, it needs to be in writing. And we can talk about even a little playbook for sales reps. We've put together playbooks for clients, and it's helped them with the overall development and training of their new salespeople. So we can talk about what that looks like. But the repeatable processes really are long-term. They're sustainable. They're documented. You can measure it. It's clearly defined how that process works for getting someone, a new sales rep, from point A to point B. And point A is they've been hired, and point B is a fully functional, producing member of your team. So when you build out that process and you document it and you define it and you put measurements around it, it works. So let me give you an example of sort of a repeatable process. Let's just talk about the daily interaction. So if we take a sales rep and we're looking at, say, a 90-day onboarding process, that's 5 days a week, 4 4 weeks in a month. We'll use average, right? So there's 20 days, 20 business days in a month. So that's 60 business days that we have to get this job done. So one of the great processes before they walk in the door, we have that 60 days mapped out. We know exactly what happens in week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on. And then we begin. So we know what we're going to do in week 1, and we begin to fill out the calendar. This is X day that they're meeting with the marketing manager. Y day they're doing this. And in between some of that, there's sales work, right? So it's not just all onboarding. We want them making calls. We want them doing their outreach, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea behind the repeatable process, we have a rep starting. Let's build this out. Everybody knows their role. So the marketing manager knows that on the X number of days throughout this 90-day period, it's on the calendar. They're going to teach the sales rep about the buyer personas and the messaging and the content and whatever else marketing needs to teach them. It's repeatable. It happens every time. It's defined. This is what you have to do. And we measure the success. So at the end of the week, we measure the success of what was to be accomplished that week. And then at the end of 30 days, we measure how well they've progressed and whether they've met our minimum standards. And what happens if they don't meet it? What happens when they exceed it? What happens in a week they fall short? It's documented. This is the process. This is the program. This is how it's managed. And by the way, one of the things I like to put in there, the dates and the times for the meetings, and I've said this before, they're set in stone. Sales manager can't say, well, I want to take them on this call, or I want to take her out and feel with me today to do X, Y, Z. Let's reschedule it. I really don't like to see that happen at all. Because once it starts, it opens the floodgates. And then it creates a level of disrespect from the new rep and the manager for the entire onboarding process, as if it's not as important as the other things that are going on. And it just kills this whole repeatable process. So it's pretty simple example there. And there's not hundreds, but there's a number of them you can use to build out your program. Part of it could be the sales training, what needs to be accomplished. So for a company we built that was hard product they were selling, equipment, we built out the program. This is what they need to know on the different manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. They need to know how to show the product to specific clients, and they need to pass a written, a verbal test, and a demonstration test. And they go through the trainer for that. And they can't be certified to sell the product in the field until they meet those measurable goals. It's documented. It's set in stone. The training manager for the company that we did it for was responsible for the outcome. So if they certified somebody and they went out in the field and screwed something up on the equipment side, they own that, as well as the rep in the field. So hopefully this makes sense to you. The repeatable, well-documented, clearly defined, and measurable processes for a good sales onboarding program. Okay, next I want to talk about tool set. And a tool set can be pretty wide-ranging depending on who you talk to. So you're talking to the sales enablement experts, it might be one thing. The marketing folks, it might be another. Administration, it could be another person. So I think one of the ways in which you build a really solid onboarding program is you decide what tool sets are going to be used and what role they play and how important are they to this process. This helps you manage the onboarding process. That's tool set number one, right? So I'll give you an example of tool set number one. When I first built a sales onboarding process years ago, I used Excel to manage that whole sort of 90-day weekly schedule. And we built the schedule out within the spreadsheet with each week representing a workbook, right? So a week in the life of that rep. And it was a shared document. Actually worked pretty good. And we put in their calendar, in their Microsoft Office calendar, all of the meetings and appointments before they even started. So it was all connected. That's That's an example of a tool set used to manage the onboarding process. So everyone had access to that sheet. After your meeting, you put your notes in and you signed off that they completed whatever it is that you were completing with them. Ultimately, if the trainer did training, and say there was 2 sessions during the week to do training, they'd sign off that they did the 2 sessions. They drop down with their initials, and they put any notes in there. And so that would be the sort of the guiding document in the overall management of the team. So when I would sit in sales managers meetings with managers, or the client would sit in sales managers meetings, it's the same thing. They would, they can go over that sheet and discuss it. So that's an example of a tool set that's used to manage the process. And if you have some HR software, you can use that. There might be something that you want to use in Salesforce. There's some things that I use right now with clients that are helpful. So the first part of that tool set is managing the onboarding. That's what that's about. And again, we go back to clearly defined processes. We go back to understanding how everything works and what tools. So we define that. This is the tools we're going to use. This is how we're going to use it. And this is the expectation. So let's say, for example, you have someone that's conducting training, but they're not updating the information and not putting notes in. That breaks down the process. So the leader of the sales onboarding program, the person responsible for the overall guidance and management of that, would have a meeting with them and say, hey, I need your help with this. We need to do this properly. They need to be held accountable to that. But it's much easier when you have tool sets to do that. The second part of that is the tool sets for the sales reps, right? What are they going to use? What are they going to use to be highly productive? I am a big believer in things that help them do their job in the field. So what do I mean by that? Heavily administrative laden CRMs stink. Total waste of time. It's nearly impossible to get buy-in. I'm losing my voice here. It's nearly impossible to get buy-in, okay, because you have them typing into a CRM system for reports that are really highly regarded up the food chain. So think about your CRM as a pipeline management tool and a prospect management tool, because that's really what we're doing. I want them developing opportunities and using the CRM to track that. And once they become an opportunity, I want them to track the opportunity through the pipeline. Those are the 2 areas I can help you develop into a much better rep if you just do that for me. So what tool set are they going to use? What's the CRM? Do you have an email tracking tool like HubSpot Sales? They used to call it Sidekick. Now they call it Sales. For tracking emails, open rates, click-through rates. Did they open the email? Did they click the attachment? How many times did they open it? Those are all helpful things when you're reaching out, doing your outbound sales work. What tool set am I going to use? Where is my content located? Do I have a library for them? Do I have a library with the content, and somewhere along the line is marketing going to teach them what pieces of content they have available and how they are to be used? Again, tool set. It's much easier if it's in a repository that's easily managed and easily found. Yeah, you can put it in a Google Drive. I don't recommend it, but you can do that. Okay? Or they can store it on their desktop or somewhere buried on their laptop, and they could be using an old version a year from now. That's 6 versions ago. You don't want that. Again, what's the tool set for managing content? What's the tool set for managing opportunities, the CRM? What's the tool set for managing emails? So define the tool sets. What do they need to do their job the most efficiently? And this is where you can really tweak this as you go along. You're going to tweak processes. You're going to get feedback from the reps. But updating and managing the tool set is really important because it kind of flows into that sales enablement discussion. Sales enablement's about putting sales reps in a position to sell more. Sales enablement is giving them quick access to the stuff that they need to help clients or prospects. Whatever data they need, whatever information, whatever tools, whatever brochure, whatever it is, okay? It's really important for sales enablement that happen, right? So if that's what we're doing and we're building that into onboarding, that's a natural flow. It's real easy to manage that. So I think I've talked about toolset enough. And if anybody, I always say in podcasts, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me or reach out, and hopefully I can answer some questions on that. Okay, we're going to talk about leadership. And we kind of went through the job descriptions. We went through the roles and responsibilities for folks. We also touched on repeatable processes. Well, leadership plays an important role here. And I'm going to talk about it in terms of really kind of almost multi-level, right? So the first level, the ground level, is who is ultimately responsible for the onboarding program? A single entity, the leader of that program. Generally, that resides in sales. And how much latitude do they have and authority do they have with the other team members? Maybe there's people from other divisions. And when it comes to onboarding, who's responsible for that, and how can they direct that? That's what I'm talking about here. And what's the repeatable process? Okay, what is the process for reviewing the onboarding program and recommending changes? So the real key here is to be able to lay out the leadership role, the job description. Again, the leader has to have a job description because they could leave the company and you need to assign it to somebody else. So they need to know what the roles and responsibilities are. They need to document how the onboarding process was built and all the programs. And how often are you going to address that? I'd say you get a few reps through the program initially, you get some really good feedback, you make some changes. Unless something falls out of the sky and says, wow, we really need to change this, I would keep it as consistent as possible, but understanding that you evolve as your company evolves. You add new products to the mix. Maybe it gets a little more complex. Maybe there's a new ERP. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's going to have to change, and they make that determination. They are responsible for that role. That's leadership at the ground level. That's overall responsibility for the onboarding program, the sales onboarding program. Now, if you're a larger company, a small company, hey, man, it could be the owner of the company or a VP of sales or a sales manager. In a larger company, it could be the same, but above them is a senior management position. What's the reporting structure to senior management, and how do they work with senior management? Define that. Define the meetings and discussions on that. Why? Because onboarding needs to match the corporate vision. How do these senior managers see the company growing? How do they see it moving forward in the future? If they have an idea on what they want their reps to do and how they want them to execute and the vision for success, the onboarding program needs to reflect that. So the leadership, senior management leadership, needs to confer with leadership of the onboarding program, make sure they're on the same page. They need buy-in on both sides. So what's the structure for that? Do you meet once a quarter? Do you meet once a year? I'd say once a year is probably, if it's a larger organization, too long of a time frame. Like if you have 2 sales reps and it's the manager and the owner, you can probably do this in a year, once a year. So you sort of need to think about that based on the size of your program and some of the things that you're doing in your company. Now, it could be a small company where some big changes have come along and it requires you to take a look at it and address it. So just think about that, how your leadership structure is set up for the onboarding program and how they interface up the food chain. And of course, down with the sales reps to get good feedback on the program. Okay, finally, this is all about measurement, right? At the end of the day, was it successful or wasn't it? So how do you determine success of your onboarding program? This is kind of similar to the sales process when I talk about a milestone-centric sales process. There's milestones that you have to hit, and in between those milestones, there's things that you do that are key indicators that you're moving towards that milestone. It's the same here. So if our objective is to get somebody in the door day 1, and on day 91, they're fully baked and ready to sell for you, okay, that's a key indicator. And what are the milestones? The 30-day increments, are they hitting, and the weekly increments, right? At the end of the week, did they hit what they were supposed to hit? Are they on track? At the end of the month, when they're scored out, did they meet the minimum acceptable? Did they exceed it, or did they fall below? And what did we do about it? Those are the measurements. And at the end of that process, did we hit our target to have them in the field ready to sell for us? Day 91. Revenue is an important measurement of success. Are they hitting the revenue targets in a shorter time frame than we have in the past? Hey, we just developed this really cool onboarding program, and now it's taken us longer to get people up and running, and we're selling less. That's unacceptable, right? So if we're shortening the time frame, that a new sales rep gives us return on investment that we talked about in the last podcast. If we're shortening the time frame and we're increasing our revenue and increasing our productivity, we should be able to measure that. And those are good measurements to have, right? So think about what kind of measurements you're going to put in place. So hopefully this lays down the blueprint on how to implement your sales onboarding program. You can find us at alignment-group.com/thefunnel. You can subscribe there and get the show notes in your email. Hit us up on social media, Facebook. My Twitter's @ShayJohnR, LinkedIn, Google+. Or you can just contact me, jshay@alignment-group.com. alignment-group.com. If you go to the website and you want to reach out to me, you can hit the contact us at the bottom of the page. You can even schedule a meeting with me. It takes you directly to my calendar, schedules a go-to-meeting, which, we can do a phone call. Pretty easy. So stop on by and do that. Thanks for subscribing, and until next time, keep filling the funnel.